What's up everybody, 24/7 Bricks here, welcome back to a brand new video, and in today's video we are going to be doing the Season 6 overview, so let's hop straight into it, sit back, relax and enjoy the video. So to start off with, we have Episode 1. Now in Episode 1 I wanted to experiment a bit with rock work as well as ground colour and texture variations. Now I decided to do a sand green and a medium nougat ground variant, as well as using the sand colour to make a natural footpath which shows a lot of foot traffic in the area. Now going back to the rock work and the ground textures, I decided to use the sand green as any greenery and foliage, as well as using the medium nougat to make any sort of rock work. I used a lot of snot technique to get the rock formations the way they look, as well as just regularly building on top of studs, which also helped create some natural curves and aesthetics to the rock. Now I wanted to do small patches of rock work as I was still practicing and I was still unsure of what I wanted and how to do this technique, so that's why there's just a few little patches of boulders or just cliff faces which look fantastic, and I really like the way they look together. Now moving on, going back to the groundwork, we've got some nice looking interesting alien plants using some leaf and fern pieces with the red sort of stem and teeth pieces which look fantastic. The figure placement looks awesome and I'm really happy with how this mock turned out overall. Next up we have Episode 2. Now Episode 2 I decided to inspire from the Battlefront 2 game and the Star Wars universe itself, and I decided to build my own sort of variation of Theed. Now we've got the droid forces and the clone forces all fighting it out on the battlefield. The structures look awesome, considering that I have a very limited light tan selection. I decided to do my best and I decided to do a lot of arches and emphasize those arches quite significantly, as if you look on the actual Star Wars Battlefront game, all the builds have a lot of arches and curves in the structures. I also decided to add a lot of elevated walking platforms like in the Battlefront 2 game, which gives it a little bit more height, as well as the plants as well. Again, this mock is very inspired from the Battlefront 2 game, so there's a lot of plants which gives it a nice little colour. I also decided to experiment with an explosion on one side of the mock, so it's nice, small, and it's simple and it doesn't look too crazy. Now I'm really happy with how this mock turned out overall. For a really simple build and really simple structures, this mock looks fantastic and phenomenal. And I'm really happy with how accurate it looks to the Battlefront 2 and Theed itself. Next up we have Episode 3. Now Episode 3 is a combination of several different things that I wanted to include in a mock. One of those things being a base, a vehicle and some rock work that again was a lot of experimenting and a lot of trial and error. Now I decided to add a step speeder for the vehicle, very simple, however it was very effective considering that I was doing stuff with cliffs and rock faces. I decided to expand the rock faces and go for something more out of my comfort zone and do it a little bit taller and a little bit more complex, which actually kind of helped when it came down to building and trying things, and I'm really happy I did actually try it. I also wanted to include a base, so I thought it'd be a good idea to place it on top of the cliff to give it that real extra height and real extra elevation, and I think it turned out so cool with the way it's planted. I really wish that I was able to get more curves or angles in the base instead of it just being a box, which is something that I can always improve on in the future. Now I also could improve on the rock face, however at this time I was really new to the technique. However, it would be a really fun, interesting thing to explore, and again, there's lots of improvements that I could have made. However, I'm fundamentally happy with how this mock turned out. Next we have Episode 4. Now Episode 4 does not look like much, however the ground textures and colours that I used in this mock really bring it to life. Now I usually do a lot of paths in my build, but in this one I decided to change it up and do a lot more dark grey and the sand blue colour, which gives it a little bit more texture variation and difference from my usual sort of paths that I do. I decided to add some unique plant life, which gives it a little bit more life as well as height, and also the medium nougat and the lighter sand colour really go well together as a interesting sort of ground texture. Now to give it a little bit more height, I decided to add the AT-RT in the front of the mock, as well as I tried again to make an explosion similar to the Theed mock and tried to experiment a little bit more and make it a little bit bigger. However, I did find this really difficult and I did get really frustrated with it. However, I think it turned out okay overall. Again, this mock is very simple, there's no big battles, it's just the clones walking along a path, and I would definitely like to do a more intense battle style version of this mock using all the ground colours and texture variations as well as the plants. However, this MOC has a lot of potential and I would definitely do it as a larger scale in the future. Halfway through the season we have episode 5. Now episode 5 was a combination of experimenting with more rock textures and rock variations, as well as experimenting with more ground color texture variations. So I'm using a lot of olive green as well as the sand and dark sand colors here to try and do something a little bit different. Now it's very limited on olive green, which is why you see a lot of studs and not very many tiles, but I think the idea is there. The rock work, as you can see, I've improved upon much more, and it looks really cool, giving a little bit more texture and tone with the dark sand color on the bottom and the lighter one on the top. So I do believe that I'm improving in textures and color variations when it comes down to building cliff faces. Now you'll probably also notice that I've gone back to doing smaller rock formations, as I really did struggle on episode 3. So I decided to take it back a notch and do smaller rock variations to sort of get a little bit more practice in and to actually give myself a chance to develop my techniques and what I'm doing when it comes down to rock formations and cliff works. We've got a nice assortment of plants, very basic, but they do add a little bit more colour and texture to the build. I think there are a few more improvements that I could have made to this MOC, but I think this MOC turned out okay overall. Next up we have episode 6. Now episode 6 looks very basic and very boring, but I did try to make it interesting as possible by adding lots of different details and parts in this MOC. Now as you can see, I added a few little burnt out trees in the background of the MOC where the droids are. I think they were a good attempt, however I need to actually get the right colour pieces. As you can see, there is some lime green sticking through the black plates and tiles, which definitely ruins the MOC a lot, but however it was a good attempt. I did decide to also add a canopy with lots of storage using an actual fabric cloth piece. I have no idea what set this cloth piece is from, but I can tell you now it's really old as I've had it for a while. To add a lot more height, including the trees, I decided to add this antenna array, which gives it a lot more height and a little bit more colour from all the browns, greens and sand colours. The crates also give it a little bit more colour, again adding more grey to the surrounding area. I also think the plants turned out nicely, again giving it more colour, adding a bit more maroon, red and orange in there, which makes it look a lot cooler. But anyway, I think this MOC turned out okay. Again, could use some more tile work, but that's nothing I could really help due to piece limitations. Now this wouldn't be a proper 24/7 Bricks mini MOC series without an interior of a base. So for episode 7, that's what I thought I'd do. I used a lot of different textures and colours to give the base a little bit more life and to give it a lot more colour. This time I decided to use a lot of gold as well as medium nougat, red and dark red pieces to add that colour and to make it look a lot less boring. I also added a little bit of height by adding a little platform on the left side of the MOC, and I think it's a really interesting slice of a base considering that the walls are all at a right angle, basically giving you an inside look of what the base could potentially be like. Now I've added a lot of crates and items that I've used in previous MOCs, as well as also I've done a tutorial on to show you guys how to build them for yourselves. I also like to give you guys a little insight into how many minifigures I actually have, so I've tried to put as many minifigures and clone troopers in this MOC as possible. However, there are a lot more, so if you do want to see a video on me showing off my collection, then let me know down in the comments below. Now we're really getting close to the end. This is episode 8. Now in episode 8 I want to do an Imperial style MOC or a Rebel Galactic Civil War style MOC, as I haven't done one in a while, and by this point I had also got some new items which include some blasters for the rebels and stormtroopers, as well as some new pieces to make more rebels for my collection. Now I did a really interesting ground texture and techniques by making little patches and filling them with medium nougat while also keeping the surrounding grass area in the dark green. I think this looks awesome and it gives it a nice sort of colour texture and colour variation, and also gives it a few more heights and dips in the MOC. Now the trees look awesome, even though they're really thin. I think the colour textures look really awesome. I kind of got inspired from Stormy Cube with these trees, however I didn't have the right pieces to make the branches thicker, so I just decided to do with what I got and use the thin sort of rods. I also added some brown seaweed pieces here and there, as well as the teeth pieces to make them look like branches, and I think it looks awesome. I really love all the minifigure placements. Again, it looks really cool, as well as all the plant placements, scattering them here and there and not overly filling it with plants. Again, I think this MOC is fantastic. There is a lot of improvements that I could do, which includes tile work, but I think it turned out okay overall. Now, second to last, we have episode 9. Now, episode 9, I really went all out when it came down to experimenting with plants and ground texture. I decided to use some dark green as well as maroon red for the ground texture, which looks really funky but also really cool. I was really limited on pieces when it came down to the maroon red, so I decided to do small maroon patches here and there just to give it a little bit more colour. I also decided to do something a little bit interesting and copy the tree designs that I had in the previous MOC. However, I decided to use the grey flex tube, which gives it a little bit more curvature and to make it look a bit more strange and funky. Also, I decided to add lots of magenta plants everywhere again, which makes it look a little bit more interesting and gives it a little bit more colour than you would usually have. Again, I'm really happy with how the minifigures placement looks, and I'm really happy with how it looks overall. Again, it's very simple and very basic. It needs a lot more tile work, but I think it gets the point across, and I think this one's just basically me experimenting. But again, I think it looks cool overall. And finally, we have episode 10. This was the final episode of season 6. Now, this is probably one of my top favourites throughout this season, mainly just because of the ground textures and what I decided to do. Now, I had a lot of grass stems and leaves, so I decided to just chuck them all into this MOC. And I think if I remember this correctly, there was 257 stems, which is absolutely insane. Even though it's a really flat MOC, I decided to add some AT-RTs here and there, just to give it a little bit more height and to just make it look cool in general. I also decided to use my famous mushrooms that some of you guys like. Strangely, I do think they look really cool and they go well with this MOC, but you guys ask me to use them way too much. On top of this, with the ground texture, I decided to go with the basic sand and olive green colour. Now, I see a lot of MOC builders using these colour variants, and it is a bit boring, so I did decide to add some dark brown colours in there just to mix it up and to make it look a little bit more different. I also decided to add or experiment with some ground elevation, just not with rock work, but with ground elevation itself, using a lot of curves, tiles and cheese slopes, just to make it look a little bit more interesting and to experiment with ground textures more. Overall though, I'm really happy with how this MOC turned out. I think it's probably one of my top favourites from this season. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and we'll finish up today's video. Overall, I think this mini MOC series turned out okay. I think I experimented a lot in this one with textures and techniques, which was really interesting and fun to do. However, let me know down below what I should do next, and let me know if you're excited for Season 7 of the mini MOC series. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in next week's video.